1 year ago, I accomplished something that every competitive Pokemon player dreams of: winning one of the most prestigious tournaments, the European International Championships. A huge portion of the strongest players in the world travel far and wide in order to attend, including reigning world champions and some of Japan's finest, all competing for $10,000 in prize money, an invitation to the Pokemon World Championships, and the glory of winning the biggest tournament of all time, with a record-breaking 1,257 entrants. Competitive Pokemon has exploded in popularity over the past few years, so much so that the title of largest official Pokemon tournament in history has been broken not once, not twice, but 4 times, and at 3 of those record-breaking events, I managed to win the entire thing. Now, however, my title is in jeopardy once more, because this year's European Internationals has once again surpassed its predecessor, with 1,455 entrants, and become the largest tournament in the game's history so far. So not only am I looking to defend my title as the champion of European Internationals, I'm also trying to maintain my status as the winner of the largest tournament. Yeah, no pressure, right? Only one problem: I haven't been playing Pokemon. Well, okay, I actually picked up the trading card game a little bit, but that's not gonna help me here. Mega Absol is not tournament legal in this game. My last video game event was 4 months ago, and it was clear even before that I needed to take a break. Pokemon is a really difficult game for a number of reasons, and the only way that I've been able to remain a strong competitor over the past 15 years is because I recognize when I'm feeling burnt out and allow myself to take a break for a time. Now, the good news is that this break was exactly what I needed, but the bad news is I don't have a lot of time to build a team. Well, okay, technically I do have time. I left myself about a month to figure something out, which is normally more than enough. But what I didn't account for was how busy my personal life was going to be during this period. Shocking revelation: Wolf does do things that aren't just fake out, intimidate, parting shot, knock off, flare blitz. Suddenly, my month to prepare had dissipated, and with 1 week left to go until the event, I found myself faced with a difficult decision. I had a team that I'd spent the entirety of my prep time working on. This team had some pretty major strengths, and I knew that I could win games with it. However, I also knew something else. Not only did the team have some major weaknesses, but it was incomplete. I had not found the right 6 Pokemon to build the team that I wanted. This is not a position that I find myself in very often. It's not that my teams are always the best call for the tournament I'm entering, but every team is an idea given shape, a concept that I believed was strong enough to win. I'm not always right about which concept I pick, but I am pretty good at taking these concepts to their final form. Except here, I know that this isn't the final form of this idea. I have 3 options. The first is to abandon the team entirely and take a different team off the shelf that somebody else has built that I know for a fact works. I ruled this out almost immediately, partially due to my pride as a team builder, but mostly because people will be prepared for standard teams, and without experience on my side using these teams, I just can't see myself winning. The second option is to spend the remaining week doing any and everything that I can to try and complete the team. And the third option is to accept that the team has flaws and try and win anyway. For most of my career, I would have chosen the second option, with the belief that if I can get the team to its final form, I can win. But here, it's the third option that I'm betting on. I have a hunch that this team needs not 1, but 2 Pokemon changed in order to reach completion, and I just don't think that a week is enough time to figure out what to change. And even if I do figure it out, it will definitely leave me exhausted. I'll be thinking about the problem day and night, spending all my waking moments testing, and I'll show up to the tournament nowhere near my full strength. So I've decided to not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and will be attempting to defend my title with a team that I know isn't finished. The majority of players will have worked tirelessly before this tournament. They've spent hours upon hours mapping out their strategies, practicing their matchups, perfecting their EV spreads, and ensuring that every one of their Pokemon is the best that it can be. Some may have detailed spreadsheets and hundreds of hours worth of notes, while I have an incomplete team and a dream. It's kind of exciting, right? How well can I do when I'm not playing with a full deck from the get-go? Of course, the ideal situation is that your team just wins the game for you and you beat everybody without breaking a sweat, but the reality is you're never playing in such perfect conditions, and a team is only as good as the player wielding it anyway. I may have been influenced by my mono bug tournament run where I did better than expected. Anyway, without further ado, I would like to introduce one of my most interesting teams of Scarlet and Violet, starting with one of the most destructive Pokemon the format has to offer. This team team began with a single, simple idea. What if I knocked out all of my opponent's Pokemon before they could do anything? Honestly, it's a great idea. Surely one of my best. The problem is that taking it from an idea to reality is a little easier said than done. Here's why I thought it might be possible in the first place. A lot of the best teams right now are being a bit lackadaisical with their speed control. Speed control refers to moves, items, and abilities that allow your Pokemon to move faster than your opponents, with the most famous examples being the moves Tailwind and Trick Room. Lots of teams right now aren't using many speed control moves at all, instead relying on priority attacks. Priority attacks move first regardless of the speed stats on the field, but if you can just find a way to stop them, I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, the team to beat right now is called Balance. These teams use a number of bulky Pokemon with great support to control the pace of battle, but other than their many priority moves, they rely entirely on one Pokemon for speed control, Flutter Mane. And it's a Flutter Mane that has one of the single most evil sets in the history of Scarlet and Violet, rivaling Fissure Ting Lu. See, Flutter Mane was clearly designed as an offensive Pokemon, with spectacular special attack and speed stats. Competitive Pokemon players, however, do not care what was intended, and have begun training Flutter Mane entirely in its bulk. Now it's extremely hard to remove, and with its held item Booster Energy raising its speed, it also is almost always moving first, even without much training in its speed stat. What it does with this bulk and this speed is ruin the days of everyone unfortunate enough to face it, by using Thunder Wave to not only slow down foes, but also give them a permanent, incurable chance to not attack every turn for the rest of the battle. If you try and chip away at it over time, not only will you allow your entire field to become paralyzed, but some Flutter Mane are even running the move Pain Split, which allows it to heal up while damaging your Pokemon in the process. It can use Taunt and Icy Wind for further disruption, and it still does tons of damage even though it isn't trained at all offensively because of its naturally high special attack stat and the huge base power of Moonblast. Very, very few Pokemon can KO Flutter Mane in one hit, but the one that can is the starting point of this team. My own Flutter Mane. Unlike these chaotic evil versions, I'm using a good, honest, homegrown Flutter Mane with choice specs. This boosts its damage to scary levels, and when it's boosted even further, I'm getting ahead of myself again. Flutter Mane can not only remove opposing Flutter Mane with just one Shadow Ball, it also outspeeds the majority of other Pokemon often found on balanced teams. So once you get rid of the Flutter Mane, you'll be the fastest Pokemon on the field. With its powerful spread move Dazzling Gleam and a Terra type of Fairy, Flutter Mane can do respectable damage. But if you give it a little help, it can do so much more. If you're new to competitive Pokemon, the synergy between Torkoal and Flutter Mane isn't super obvious. On the one hand, you have effectively the slowest Pokemon to ever be good, and on the other hand, you have one of the fastest. Their typings don't have that much obvious synergy either, so what's the deal? Well, Flutter Mane has the ability Photosynthesis, which gives its highest stat a boost when it's holding the booster energy or when the strong sunlight is active, and Torkoal's Drought ability sets up the strong sunlight. Normally, players use Drought to make Flutter Mane faster, giving it effectively both the Choice Scarf and the Choice Specs at the same time. But remember that in this format, players are sacrificing their speed control, and so that extra boost isn't as crucial. That's the reason why here, Torkoal will be boosting Flutter Mane's special attack, giving it a power boost that scales multiplicatively with the choice specs. And that's not all. Torkoal also gets the move Helping Hand, which gives its partner a 50% damage boost on all their moves for the turn. Torkoal may be slow, but Helping Hand is the highest priority of any move in the game, meaning that it'll always go first, despite Torkoal's lethargy. Adding Helping Hand to Photosynthesis, Choice Specs, and Terra Fairy means that Flutter Mane can output truly monstrous amounts of damage that I think the field is unprepared for. Of course, Torkoal can do more than just power up Flutter Mane. In addition to its sun making wet Urshifu feel a little more dry, Torkoal works as a powerful offensive threat in its own right, thanks to Eruption, a ridiculously powerful fire-type move that gets weaker the lower Torkoal's HP gets. Fire also perfectly complements Flutter Mane's Fairy typing, hitting the steel Pokemon that Flutter Mane can't. However, in order to unlock its full potential, Torkoal has to be attacking first, and the only reliable way to do that involves Trick Room. Trick Room reverses the speed order that Pokemon move in, causing slower Pokemon to move before faster ones. It's an iconic move in part because it's learned by so many Pokemon. So knowing that you want Trick Room on your team doesn't necessarily give you as much direction as you would think. But as it turns out, my single favorite Pokemon of Generation 9 learns Trick Room, and is a crucial piece of the puzzle of setting up for Flutter Mane's Rampage. Remember how I told you that lots of teams are forgoing speed control because they can rely on priority attacks? Well, that's only actually a weakness if you can stop priority attacks in the first place. And that's where Farigiraf comes in. With its signature ability Armor Tail, all priority moves used against your team while Farigiraf is on the field will be fully negated. This is ridiculous utility, and works to both protect Flutter Mane outside of Trick Room and Torkoal within, preventing my opponent from using Fake Out to reposition, or a strong priority move to threaten my sweepers. Just like Torkoal, Farigiraf can do more than just support. I'm using my favorite moveset, which combines the item Throat Spray with offensive training. The idea is that Farigiraf can use the move Hyper Voice to not only deal damage, but also activate its held item, giving it a special attack boost. Once powered up, Psychic does ridiculous damage, and Hyper Voice can quickly stack up as well. Ignore Farigiraf to focus on the more obvious threats of Torkoal and Flutter Mane, and you can quickly find yourself overwhelmed by the Giraffe. The biggest weakness of this Farigiraf set is that by investing so heavily in its offenses, it's not quite as bulky as I would like it to be. In fact, relying on it to set up Trick Room without any help is often a little bit too ambitious. Fortunately for me, Farigiraf's best buddy is here to keep it safe and let it do its job. If you're surprised that Incineroar is on the team, congratulations! This is the first of my videos that you've watched, and 1 out of 5 doctors recommend subscribing so you can see more. Incineroar, like both Torkoal and Farigiraf, fills a hybrid role here. On the one hand, it serves as a defensive support Pokemon, using its Intimidate ability to weaken my foe's attack stats every time it switches in, Fake Out to slow opponents down, allowing me to reposition, set up Trick Room, or go for a KO, the move Parting Shot, not only lowering both offensive stats of whatever it hits, but also allowing Incineroar to switch out after most foes have moved, and incredible defensive typing and stats that allow it to function as a health pack for my frailer Pokemon. On the other hand, Incineroar can also do damage, because why not? Incineroar has a naturally good attack stat, and when you combine this stat with the high base power moves of Flare Blitz and Knockoff, you get a Pokemon that is difficult to ignore. Flare Blitz also gets powered up by Torkoal's Sun, giving it a 50% power boost, and Knockoff removes the item of whatever it hits, providing even more utility. Speaking of item, Incineroar holds the Safety Goggles, to give my team a little help against Pokemon using powder moves like Amoonguss and Hisuian Lilligant. Am I supposed to say Hisuian Lilligant or Lilligant Hisui? I actually am not sure. Incineroar is trained to be exactly 1 point slower than Farigiraf, which has 2 main uses. The first is that these speed stats allow Incineroar to move before Farigiraf inside of Trick Room. And that means that it can use Knockoff to remove the items that make my opponents bulkier, like Citrus Berry and Assault Vest, and it can do that before Farigiraf attacks. Knocking off the Assault Vest basically gives Farigiraf a 50% damage boost. The second reason is that I can now use Incineroar's Intimidate ability to check whether or not my Farigiraf will be faster than other Pokemon, like opposing Incineroar. Since abilities activate in turn order, I know that if on the first turn, my Incineroar's Intimidate activates before my opponent's Incineroar's Intimidate, that means that my Incineroar is faster, and therefore my Farigiraf will be faster, and I don't actually need to set up Trick Room. Both Incineroar and Farigiraf are actually quite fast on this team, and that seems weird, since I've hyped them up as a core part of my Trick Room mode. Incineroar is naturally bulky enough that it doesn't need to be moving first to be strong, but what about Farigiraf? Doesn't it need a little help? Yes, it does. The 5th member of the team is the legendary Ogerpon, specifically the Wellspring Mask form. Despite being one of the indisputable best Pokemon from Generation 9, I've only actually used Ogerpon once, at the 2024 Charlotte Regional Championships. There, I used Ogerpon Hearthflame Mask, and I won the tournament, never to use Ogerpon again. Until now. Now, we have to address the elephant in the room. Ogerpon Wellspring is a grass and water type, and its signature move, Ivy Cudgel, is a water-type move when it's in this form. This has clear and major anti-synergy with Torkoal, who weakens all water-type moves with its Drought ability. This is not ideal, but it also isn't as big of a problem as you might think. Sometimes Ogerpon prefers to use its grass move Hornleech, whether for a better type matchup or because of the healing that it provides, or the opponent is low enough that the damage reduction doesn't really change anything, they're going down to Ivy Cudgel anyway. Or Ogerpon is using Spiky Shield, an improved version of Protect that damages any attacker who makes contact with it. Or Ogerpon doesn't want to be attacking, but supporting. See, all Ogerpon forms learn one of the single best supporting moves in the game, Follow Me, which redirects all attacks your opponent used this turn to the user. This may not sound like a big deal, but imagine Ogerpon next to Torkoal. protecting it while it uses Eruption, or next to Flutter Mane, keeping it safe from harm as it mows down the competition. This also works with Farigiraf, as Ogerpon can keep it safe while it sets up Trick Room, or while it uses Hyper Voice to get a special attack boost. Ogerpon has good natural bulk, and becomes even bulkier when it terastallizes. It's locked to a Terra type of water, which isn't actually a bad thing. Water is good defensively as it removes its weaknesses to bug, flying, and poison attacks, and it also works offensively, giving Ogerpon a power boost on its water move. Even better, when Ogerpon terastallizes, it loses its base ability and replaces it with Embody Aspect, which gives it a special defense boost. Oh yeah, and its base ability is Water Absorb, which heals it whenever a water move tries to damage it. With this, Ogerpon is fully immune to the terrifying Urshifu's signature move, Surging Strikes. This probably doesn't seem that important with Torkoal already on the team, cutting water moves in half, but actually there is not another water resistance on this team, and some teams have ways of overriding the sun, such as Rain Dance Tornadus teams. And that's it! That's the team! These 5 Pokemon work together well and can wrong foot opponents due to their ability to shift from defense to offense and back again in the blink of an eye. Except, there's a slight problem. I still need a 6th Pokemon on this team. Okay, here's the deal. With these 5 Pokemon, I knew that something wasn't right. I was weak to Dondozo, to Tera Fairy Raging Bolt, and worst of all, to that stupid Speed Booster Flutter Mane set that I'd set out to beat in the first place. And so, after much testing and a lot of thought, I decided to add Chen Pao, who doesn't help against Dondozo, Tera Fairy Raging Bolt, or Booster Energy Flutter Mane. So what's the deal? Why would I add a Pokemon that doesn't actually address any of the problems? The short answer is that no Pokemon addressed all of the problems and actually fit with the rest of the team. And believe me, I tried a bunch of them. This is the reason why I said that I suspected that 2 Pokemon had to change earlier for the team to reach its final form. Because if there's no Pokemon that feels good to complete your team, it's probably because the other Pokemon aren't pulling enough of the weight. So instead, I've selected Chen Pao as my last Pokemon, because it fills a lot of the structural weaknesses of the team, despite not being good for these specific weaknesses. Chen Pao is fast, really fast. It'll outspeed almost all Pokemon that aren't boosting their speed in some way. It's also powerful. With high base attack and an ability that lowers the defense of all other Pokemon on the field, it can do very respectable damage if left alone. It also adds some much appreciated moves into the mix, with the powerful ice type attack Icicle Crash giving me another way of hitting Dragon Pokemon and giving me a chance to flinch as long as it actually hits. Sacred Sword can hit the Steel types used to stop Flutter Mane. And Sucker Punch provides some nice priority on a team that otherwise lacks it. So basically, I chose Chen Pao because I felt that I needed a fast and powerful attacker. However, the format is full of Pokemon that can weaken and slow Chen Pao down, from Icy Wind Speed Booster Flutter Mane to the omnipresent Incineroar and its Intimidate. Which is the reason why I have bucked traditional wisdom, and instead of using the standard Focus Sash item to help keep Chen Pao alive, I've gone with the Clear Amulet. This prevents my opponent from lowering my stats, but does make my Chen Pao more vulnerable. And that's why I've selected Fire as my Terra type. With its resistance to Chen Pao's Fire, Fairy, and Steel weaknesses, and Bug as well, I didn't even think about Bug, it allows Chen Pao to stand up against Flutter Mane, Incineroar, and Ogerpon Hearthflame, who would otherwise be happy to see the little snow weasel. And that's what I've come up with to try and defend my title, and, for the 4th time, win the largest in-person official Pokemon tournament in history. Is it a perfect team? Absolutely not, no. Is it a good team? I think so. And as a spoiler alert, I entered a tournament using an updated version of the team the week after this one, and I did quite well. The 8 hours of gameplay for that are available on Patreon for all tiers. Patreon not only has lots of VODs, including this one where I entered a tournament with all 6 Reggies, but it's also where I put content that's specifically designed to help people get better at the game. There is tons of educational content there, including guides on how to figure out which Pokemon to lead, how to review your replays, general tournament mentality stuff, how to tell if your matchup is good or bad. There's a lot of stuff there. If you're interested in learning more about competitive Pokemon, I think it's a great resource. Anyway, my belief in my team is what allows me to enjoy the days in the lead up to London, exploring the city and experiencing good food with my friends without stressing too much about the event. Before I know it, the morning of the tournament arrives, and I head to a venue that I last left as a champion to see just what I can do. Right away, I'm thrown into the deep end. facing off against a team composition that's had a major rise to prominence just in the last month. This team is built around a speedier Ursaluna, one of the single strongest sweepers in the game, and can be terrifying to play against. With both Tailwind Tornadus and Trick Room Porygon 2, this team aims to get Ursaluna attacking first and taking KOs, protecting it with Incineroar and Ogerpon Wellspring, who can also support an alternative mode with Nasty Plot Goldengo setting up. Game 1 begins with their Porygon 2 and Incineroar lead against my Incineroar and Flutter Mane. Before turn 1 even begins, I get some important information. Their Incineroar is faster than mine. Right now though, it's not such a big deal because Flutter Mane is immune to Fake Out. Thanks to my offensive pressure, I'm able to immediately do huge damage to Incineroar while they bring in Goldengo. I get damage onto Goldengo while we both reposition, and they set up a Nasty Plot, doubling their special attack. But now I'm able to use my Terra Water Ogerpon to survive the onslaught. They set Trick Room up, but walk right into my trap as I get Torkoal in. And now, thanks to all the chip damage I've been dealing, I'm in great shape. I KO Goldengo and Porygon 2, leaving my opponent with only damaged Ursaluna and Incineroar, who are swiftly dealt with as Trick Room ends and Flutter Mane hits the field to clean up. Oh yeah, you probably noticed this notebook graphic that popped up. Let me explain. I put out a short video with all the context on this yesterday, but basically what you need to know is that I spent a full year designing a tournament legal notebook specifically for official competitive Pokemon tournaments. It's set up to help you take notes so you don't miss any crucial information during a match, like who has the faster Incineroar. EUIC was actually my first time using the notebook in person. Now, in order to make these videos enjoyable to the general public, sometimes I need to cut out information that is revealed during the battle that is relevant to the moves that I'm making, but not so relevant that it's worth the time to draw attention to it. I'm using this notebook graphic that you saw last round to show you some of these little tidbits that would otherwise be cut, because I figure that some of you will get the notebook for yourselves and want some more context on how to use it in tournament beyond the explainer video that comes with every notebook. Some of you won't get the notebook, but will still want to improve your note taking in tournament, so you can still see some of the things that I personally look out for even if you're not doing it with a specialized layout. And some of you either aren't interested in competing at all or don't know how to write. I'm not judging. And my hope is that you'll find some of these reveals that affect the battle interesting without the graphic being intrusive. You can get the notebook at vgcnotebook.com. And as for me, I'm jumping back into the set with game number 2. In game 2, I predict my opponent will switch to a Tornadus lead. And they do, using Tornadus and Incineroar against my Flutter Mane and Ogerpon. Here, there is a question. Will their Incineroar move before my Flutter Mane in Tailwind? If they do, they can go for Flare Blitz and potentially knock me out. But if they're slower, they would much rather use U-Turn. Fortunately, I don't need to guess. I know that they'll be faster because in game 1, their Incineroar outsped my Incineroar, and my Incineroar is 1 point faster than my Flutter Mane if I were to set up Tailwind. Of course, my opponent doesn't know this, so I predict that they're going to try and reposition, and I get it right. They Tailwind as I Terra Water with Ogerpon, but thanks to Tailwind, Incineroar moves before my Pokemon, using U-Turn and bringing out Goldengo. Unfortunately for them, Goldengo takes both Dazzling Gleam and Ivy Cudgel, leaving both of my opponent's Pokemon below half health. I switch Flutter Mane to Incineroar as they protect Goldengo and Bleak Wind Storm, but I ignored the cheese string and go for the KO on Tornadus. I'm still not under threat and I can continue spamming Ivy Cudgel, and I end up hitting Ursaluna, dealing half of its health as it switches in, as Goldengo goes down to my knockoff. Up 4 against 2, I'm able to safely set up for an endgame with Flutter Mane protected by Ogerpon, and I win game 2 and the set. But that was only round 1, and this tournament has a lot of rounds. They're spread out over 3 phases, with huge chunks of the field getting dropped after each phase. To make it to phase 2, I'll need to win 6 of my first 8 games. Phase 2 then has 5 more rounds, and I need to win 11 of them in total. Any losses from phase 1 carry over. The last phase is a single elimination bracket where we play until only one player is still standing. But there is a lot of Pokemon to be played before I can think about that. Round 2 is already up. My opponent is using a team built around the Rain weather condition, which is set up when Pelipper hits the field. Rain powers up their Urshifu and Archaludon while protecting Amoonguss and Chenpao from super effective fire-type moves. I'll also need to watch out for my opponent's Booster Energy Flutter Mane, which is going to be a threat no matter what the weather condition is. Game 1 begins with their Amoonguss and Archaludon against my Incineroar and Flutter Mane. The early turns favor me, as I deal half of Archaludon's health with Moonblast and remove Amoonguss's item, while they bring in Pelipper and set up Tailwind. I KO Amoonguss this turn by switching Torkoal in, but they Spore Torkoal, sending it to Sleepy Time Jail. Weather control is mine, but Torkoal can't really take advantage of it here. I can't really afford to switch out as Flutter Mane hits the field and terastallizes to Fairy. It launches a Moonblast boosted by the Terra and Photosynthesis into my already damaged Incineroar. But Incin barely survives. Hurricane misses Torkoal and Incineroar's Flare Blitz knocks out Flutter Mane as Torkoal stays asleep. It's important to count the sleep turns as the game won't tell you how long a Pokemon's been out, and the odds of it waking up changes after each turn of sleep. From here, they only have Pelipper and an already damaged Arcaludon, and all I need to do to win is stall out the Tailwind turns before getting Flutter Mane back in and cleaning up. I win Game 1. Game 2 opens with the same Pokemon from me, but the adjustment of Amoonguss and Flutter Mane from them. There is a huge question here. Whose Flutter Mane is faster? After a passive turn 1 of Protects and Fake Outs, I decide to make an aggressive call. They switch Amoonguss into Pelipper, fearing a Flare Blitz and switch to Torkoal, but I instead go for Terra Fairy Moonblast, and not only outspeed their Flutter Mane, I pick up the one-hit KO. Now, with the Pokemon lead, I can play it safe, using the offensive pressure from Flutter Mane to allow me to get control of the weather with Torkoal, which allows Moonblast to KO Amoonguss in 2 hits. Up 4 against 2, I quickly lock up the game. Round 3 is here, and I am in danger. I've drawn the single worst matchup that I encountered in any of my testing. A team named after the Japanese player Arubega. No, not that team. This guy has 2 teams named after him. That's how good he is. This is the team that popularized the super bulky Flutter Mane that I initially set out to beat, but ironically, my current version happens to be super weak to it. Good job, Wolf. That was good team building, buddy. It's hard to get rid of it quickly because of the partner Hisuian Arcanine, who holds the Choice Band and outputs enormous rock-type damage. Add on to that Assault Vest Raging Bolt and Ogerpon Wellspring for support, and this is looking like an extremely uphill battle. This team also has Galarian, Moltres, and Sneasler, but I need to worry about the other 4 Pokemon first before I can even think about those 2. What I was doing to beat this team in practice was to lead Incineroar and Ogerpon Wellspring to try and bluff the Arcanine into switching out, which would allow me to use Spiky Shield and Parting Shot to bring my own Flutter Mane in safely. From here, with Arcanine already off the field, I can try and remove their Flutter Mane and hopefully set myself up to win the game later once I get rid of their Flutter. As game 1 begins, my opponent leads with Arcanine and Flutter Mane, the default lead that I have come to expect. I lock in my turn 1 play, Spiky Shield and Parting Shot. But my opponent doesn't switch or terastallize in the face of a quadruple water weakness. Instead, they Thunder Wave into my Spiky Shield and launch a Head Smash into Incineroar, which KOs despite my Intimidate, a play that I never encountered in testing. That is not good. I send out my Flutter Mane and KO their Flutter Mane, but in the process, Ogerpon gets paralyzed and takes a Head Smash. Raging Bolt is sent out. Now I am fully pinned, as Electro Web will leave my Flutter Mane vulnerable to whatever is in the back, and that's exactly what happens, as Arcanine and Ogerpon go down, and Flutter Mane takes a speed drop. I send out Chenpao, they send out Ogerpon, but there's nothing that I can do with -1 speed on my Flutter. I lose game 1. And game 2 does not go much better. I feel pressured to make safe plays, but my opponent calls them out, switching Raging Bolt into my Fake Out and Ivy Cudgel turn 1. An early critical hit puts me behind in the Pokemon count, and it's just too hard for me to get any momentum versus the ridiculous bulk of this team. I lose game 2 and my first set of the tournament. Now, this is a relatively early loss, but the truth is that I actually don't feel too bad about it. My opponent played very well, and I knew going in that it was a bad matchup. The important thing is that I can bounce back in the next round. Unfortunately, this round I have drawn Dondozo, a difficult team to face due to its ridiculous super mech status. The only good thing is that unlike most Dondozo teams nowadays, which use Galarian Weezing to spread poison before Dondozo combines, this one has entirely offensive Pokemon instead. The battle begins with their Chi-Yu and Flutter Mane against my Incineroar and Ogerpon. This is Specs Chi-Yu, and I am pretty sure I know what's about to happen. The opponent rips Terastallization right away, turning the Goldfish to a Ghostfish, but I didn't take the bait. Icy Wind and Dark Pulse are blocked by my Spiky Shield, and Incineroar's knockoff leaves Chi-Yu with just 1 HP. I terastallize my Ogerpon to take out Flutter Mane while keeping my Ogerpon healthy enough, and Dondozo hits the field. We both reposition, them combining and me getting Flutter Mane in, who takes no damage from the Dragon type order up. I learned that their Dondozo is actually faster than my Flutter Mane, as both my Pokemon take an Earthquake and fire back with Moonblast and Hornleech. Now I see how I can win. I Spiky Shield, sacrificing Flutter Mane to get my last Pokemon in safely, Farigiraf. Follow Me does nothing against the incoming Earthquake, but lets Ogerpon go down as I go for Hyper Voice, leaving Dondozo on red HP and activating my Throat Spray. Now I can go into Incineroar, fake out to get Trick Room up safely, and sweep all 3 of my opponent's remaining Pokemon inside of the Twisted Dimensions. Game 2 takes a different path, as they switch Shiyu out to immediately combine in the face of my Incineroar and Ogerpon lead. From here, I use a different strategy myself, revealing that my final Pokemon this game is not Farigiraf, but Chen Pao. I use Sacred Sword to ignore Dondozo's defense boosts while shrugging off damage with Horn Leech, and take out Dondozo without even losing a Pokemon. Flutter Mane comes out, but the damage is done. They Terastallize to Grass as I Terastallize to Water, but Sucker Punch KOs Tatsugiri as Flutter Mane KOs Chen Pao. With a Chiyu that can't Terastallize or protect itself, it's easy pickings for Fake Out and Ivy Cudgel, and I win round 4 the following turn. Round 5 is against yet another different archetype, this time built around Gouging Fire. It uses a speed booster energy to move first, combined with the move Howl, which boosts the attack stats of both itself and its partner. By using Pokemon with the Defiant ability like Kingambit and Annihilate, as well as Pokemon with the Inner Focus ability like Choice Band Dragonite, it is very difficult to drop these heightened attack stats before they run over your team. And that's without even mentioning that they also have Chen Pao, who, as a reminder, drops all the defense stats of Pokemon in play whenever it's out. In Game 1, I decide to make an aggressive call. They are not going to lead with Annihilate. I open up with Incineroar and Chen Pao against Kingambit and Gouging Fire. Now, it is true that Kingambit gets an attack boost from Defiant, but this Kingambit is Assault Vest. It cannot protect itself. I Terastallize Chen Pao to Fire as they Terastallize Kingambit to Flying. Breaking Swipe does not do much damage, and I predicted their Terra, using Icicle Crash and Flare Blitz to secure a clean knockout. They send out their Chen Pao and make 2 good reads in a row, taking out my Flutter Mane and getting a Howl set up, but they lose Chen Pao in the process. They know that they're behind, so they go for a risky Gambit, bringing their Dragonite in and locking into extreme speed. On the same turn that I reveal that my last Pokemon is Farigiraf. With their position now fully ripped to shreds, I'm able to close out the game smoothly. Now in Game 2, I am pretty sure that they're going to bring Annihilate, and so I open with Flutter Mane and Ogerpon Wellspring, as they lead with Kingambit and Annihilate. They switch Annihilate out right away due to its poor matchup into Flutter Mane, sending out their Gouging Fire, but I ignored this slot and double Kingambit with Moonblast and Terra Water Ivy Cudgel, securing a KO before Kingambit can attack. They send out Annihilate again, and they go for Terra Steel, which I truthfully didn't look at on the team sheet. I thought that it was Terra Fire. I should have written that down using the notebook that I designed for this exact purpose. That one is on me. Anyway, thanks to the Breaking Swipe, Annihilate lives my Moonblast and Ivy Cudgel double up, but Rage Fist fails to KO my Ogerpon. And now, switching Ogerpon to Incineroar lets me survive the Heat Crash and KO Annihilate. Dragonite is forced in, but immediately goes down to Moonblast, and my opponent forfeits. I win round 5, but it's too soon for celebration, because I recognize my next opponent. It's Yuta Ishigaki, a player from Japan who placed second at the World Championships back in 2024 using a very unusual Calyrex Ice and Iron Valiant team. I am nervous, but when I see the team that my opponent has, my nerves are replaced with a sense of confidence. See, my opponent is a snow-based team with Articuno, Alolan Ninetales, Ogerpon Rock, Kingambit, Rillaboom, and Landorus Incarnate. Now you may think that I feel confident because of my Torkoal against these ice types, but that's actually not the main thing that I notice about this team. See, not one of these Pokemon resists Fairy, and not one of them can be faster than my Flutter Mane. Game 1 begins with my Chen Pao and Ogerpon against their Ogerpon and Kingambit. I know that Flutter Mane can eventually win this game, so I just need to make sure that I deal with the things that can stop it, and that includes getting some damage on their Ogerpon. Everything except for my Chen Pao protects on turn 1, and confirms that their Ogerpon is faster than mine. This Kingambit is Terra Dragon, so I figure either it'll be threatened by Chen Pao or later by Flutter Mane. I go for Sacred Sword and pick up a clean one-hit KO, as their Ogerpon KOs Chen Pao right back, and Horn Leech does a little bit to their Ogerpon. Crucially, this breaks sturdy. It's now able to be knocked out by my Flutter Mane. They send out their Landorus and I send out my Flutter Mane. I predict the next turn perfectly. Their Landorus Terastallizes to Poison as both Ogerpon go for Spiky Shield. And although Dazzling Gleam doesn't do too much damage, it does more damage than Landorus, who attacked into my Spiky Shield. Now I am fully in control. as Dazzling Gleam KOs Ogerpon and Ivy Cudgel KOs Landorus. I find myself up 3 against 1. Ogerpon and Flutter Mane work together to KO Ninetales, and I learned that their Ninetales outspeeds my Ogerpon as a little bonus piece of information. Okay, that went pretty well. I felt like I was in control for the entire game, and so I think that my opponent is going to switch it up and lead with their 2 Pokemon that are strongest into Chenpao, which are their ice types. Game 2 begins with Ninetales and Articuno against Flutter Mane and Ogerpon. With Snow already up, I know what I have to do. I switch Ogerpon to Torkoal and Terrastallize to Fairy. Dazzling Gleam might not be the strongest move on its own, but with all the multipliers I have, I KO Ninetales in one shot and do 70% to Articuno. I didn't know 100% that I would KO their Ninetales, but after I saw that they were faster than my Ogerpon, I figured they couldn't have that much bulk. Articuno retaliates with Blizzard, but in the sun there's no chance to freeze. Landorus replaces the knocked out Ninetales. They Terrastallize to Poison, but Dazzling Gleam KOs Articuno and does a ton to Landorus. Sludge Bomb knocks out my Flutter Mane, but Torkoal has yet to move, and Eruption knocks out Landorus. I'm up 3-1 once more as we both send out Ogerpon. From here, there's no way to stop Follow Me and Weather Ball from ending the game in 2 turns, and I win round 6. But my joy is short-lived because my opponent in the 7th round is using the same team as my loss earlier, the Arabega team. Actually, it's even worse as they have Landorus Incarnate in place of Sneasler, and Landorus is way stronger against my team, threatening a one-hit KO on 4 of my 6 Pokemon. Game 1 begins with my Incineroar and Flutter Mane against their Arcanine and Flutter Mane. This time, I am not going to risk that Ogerpon plan. I fake out their Arcanine as they Icy Wind, which drops my speed but lets me go for a Shadow Ball to KO their Flutter Mane. This was a really risky play as their Arcanine is Terra Ghost, but it ended up working out, so whatever. Moltres is sent out. I switch Flutter Mane out to Ogerpon, who takes a Rock Slide and Farigiraf, but Incineroar dodges the Rock Slide and uses Parting Shot to get Flutter Mane out once more. Terra Fairy, Moonblast, and Horn Leech both land into Arcanine, knocking it out as Moltres Terrastallises to Steel and goes for another Farigiraf. Luckily for me, their last Pokemon is Assault Vest Raging Bolt, who goes down to a single Moonblast. Ogerpon faints this turn, but I've done enough to close this out since I'm up 3 against 1 against a Pokemon that can't protect or switch moves. I win game 1. Game 2, I decide to switch back to Ogerpon and Incineroar, and find myself staring down Arcanine and Flutter Mane once more. I make the play I practiced and I hold my breath as Arcanine switches out. I block a Thunder Wave, and Parting Shot lets me get my own Flutter Mane out safely. They switch out again next turn, bringing Arcanine back in and going for a Thunder Wave into my Follow Me, but this lets me get a KO on Flutter Mane with Shadow Ball. A KO on their most threatening Pokemon for just 1 paralysis seems like a pretty good deal, right? Ogerpon comes back out. I switch Flutter Mane to Incineroar as they Terra Water their Ogerpon and go for Rock Slide and Horn Leech. I'm about to win the game with an Ivy Cudgel into Arcanine, but I get paralyzed. I fake out Arcanine as they Horn Leech my Ogerpon, and I try and go for a now super effective Horn Leech, but I get paralyzed again. I try and Spiky Shield, hoping to reposition, and get paralyzed a 3rd time. Horn Leech crits my Ogerpon, which allows Rock Slide to KO both. Suddenly, I'm down 2 against 3, and I haven't even seen their final Pokemon. I send out Flutter Mane and Chenpao. I have to go for it. I Terrastallize Flutter Mane to Fairy, and I knock it out with Moonblast and Sacred Sword. Rock Slide comes out, but both my Pokemon survive. My opponent sends out Landorus, and we find ourselves in a 2 against 2 situation. I have the faster Pokemon, but they have the healthier ones. What should I do? I Sacred Sword into Arcanine, and it survives with less than 5 HP. I Moonblasted that slot just in case and it goes down, but Landorus gets to move next and it goes for Sandsear Storm, which misses both of my Pokemon. Hello? Now up 2 against 1, my opponent forfeits and I win round 7 and guarantee that I advance to day 2. It wasn't the cleanest win, but after all the paralysis, I'll take it. My heart is still racing when round 8 goes up, and maybe that's why, even though I think that it's a pretty favorable matchup, I lose. My opponent plays aggressively game 1, Terrastallizing Goldango to Dragon and going for Nasty Plot as I switch my Flutter Mane out, and I don't position well enough to handle its damage output. In game 2, I make an enormous blunder, sacrificing my Farigiraf early on after setting up Trick Room, and totally forgetting that without Farigiraf, their Raging Bolt can totally ruin my day with Thunderclap. Before much time has passed, I've lost both games, ending my day 1 score with 6 wins and 2 losses. A bit of an unfortunate way to end the day, but to be honest, I'm really just happy to have made it to day 2. I knew that my team had issues, and I certainly felt them today, so making it this far feels like a big win. Also, I didn't mention this earlier, but because of my insomnia, I am really susceptible to jet lag, and I only got, being generous, maybe 3 hours of sleep last night, if that. I've had a splitting headache since round 2, and I'm honestly just so glad to be able to rest after a grueling tournament day. Except, for whatever reason, the first round of day 2 is played today. Right here, right now. For some reason in Europe, certain tournaments do this, playing this round preemptively, not letting the players who made it out of day 1 rest. This means that for a huge portion of the field, they'll go to bed tonight not with high hopes of victory and glory tomorrow, but with the knowledge that no matter how the second day goes, they won't advance to the last phase. Because 3 losses means you're out, and half of the players who currently have 2 losses will lose this round, and one of them could be me. Now, to be clear, I have positioned this as a dramatic reveal to you, the viewer, because I think it makes for more compelling storytelling. This was not a reveal to me, the player. I knew before the tournament even started that there would be this bonus round, and while I may not like it or agree with it, it was at least communicated to me, and that is pretty important. So now, after a brief break, I find myself walking to my table for the 9th time today, knowing that I might walk away having lost any hope of defending my title. And right away, things take a turn for the worse. My opponent has Entei with Choice Band, a monstrous physical threat. They also have a speed booster energy Flutter Mane. Fortunately for me, this is a matchup where Chen Pao can shine, because this Flutter Mane lacks Thunder Wave. I have a plan. I lead off with Chen Pao and Ogerpon against Entei and Flutter Mane. I terrestrialize Chen Pao to fire, Spiky Shield Ogerpon, and miss Icicle Crash. Even though my Spiky Shield blocked Sacred Fire and Icy Wind, I've lost way too much tempo. The plan, assuming that I hit, would have been to go for Sucker Punch turn 2 to KO Flutter Mane, which would have allowed Ivy Cudgel to KO Entei. But now I can't KO Flutter Mane before they go for Icy Wind, which means that I can't attack Entei and knock it out before they go for Sacred Fire. I switch out and I struggle trying to claw it back, but I'm too far behind. I lose game 1 and I'm now 1 game away from elimination. The leads are the same in game 2. Flutter Mane and Entei against Ogerpon and Chen Pao. The game plays out differently, but in the end, it's pretty unavoidable. I'm going to lose. I've played to an endgame with my Ogerpon having taken a little damage against their full HP Entei and low HP Ogerpon. I learned in game 1 that my Ogerpon was faster, but that probably doesn't help enough here. It does mean that they'll always go for Follow Me, and I Horn Leech, picking up the KO and healing. But Entei goes for Sacred Fire and connects, and Ogerpon lives, and it doesn't get the 50% chance to be burnt? Unfortunately, this Entei is at full HP, and there's no way that Ivy Cudgel KOs. It does? What? It didn't even crit! Ogerpon wins game 2 and I remain alive in the tournament. But there's still game 3 and the leads shake out in the same way. The mid game is messy, but it's clear that this team has a hero and her name is Ogerpon. At the crucial, most pivotal moment, my damaged Ogerpon survives Entei Sacred Fire with exactly 1 HP and again doesn't get burnt. And this swing is enough to let me convert into a win. I win round 9 and finish my very long day with a record of 7 wins and 2 losses, with 4 rounds left tomorrow still to be played. Probably because I'm so exhausted, I'm able to actually get a good night's sleep. I wake up the next morning feeling refreshed and ready for the day. And it looks like I will need to be in top form right from the get-go, because my opponent in round 10 is none other than the defending world champion, Giovanni Siski. Playing against a world champion always gets me pumped up. I was lucky enough to play against the defending champion Luca last year at EUIC as well. So in a way, playing against Giovanni just feels right. That's how I feel until I look at his team. He's got a variant of the Arabega team. I am playing my worst matchup for the 3rd time this tournament. To be clear, this is not an especially popular team, and the team with far more usage, the archetype known as Balance, which I explicitly prepared for, I have not drawn a single time. The thing about tournaments getting larger by number of entrants is that the variance in your schedule becomes much more dramatic, and I am definitely feeling the effects here. But I know that I can win this matchup, even though it is difficult. Giovanni doesn't have Hisuian Arcanine, instead using Incineroar. This is definitely more favorable for me given my 0 rock resistances, though it doesn't change the fact that the other Pokemon on this team are still a huge nuisance, most notably the Flutter Mane. I build my game plan around getting rid of it as soon as I can. Giovanni and I will be playing on stream, and we quickly shake hands, chat a little, and jump into game 1. It's my Ogerpon and Flutter Mane against his Landorus and Flutter Mane. This Flutter Mane doesn't have Protect, so my goal is to get rid of it as soon as I can. The safest move here is to go for Follow Me and Shadow Ball, which would protect my Flutter Mane from a potential Thunder Wave, but I don't want to lose my Ogerpon to Icy Wind and Sludge Bomb. As the turn begins, Landorus terastallizes, and my Ogerpon goes for Spiky Shield. Icy Wind drops my Flutter Mane speed, and Landorus uses the 80% accurate Sandsear Storm. And it connects, dropping Flutter Mane to low yellow HP. In retaliation, my Flutter Mane goes for a Shadow Ball and secures the KO, giving me the Pokemon lead. Giovanni sends out his own Ogerpon. In theory, I have a slight lead now. I'm up a Pokemon, and my opponent has already used their Terra. That being said, in practice, it's not so easy to maneuver around here. I have Chien-Pao and Incineroar in the back, two Pokemon who will faint to an Earth Power and take a lot of damage from Sandsear Storm. With Flutter Mane's speed already dropped, it's a bit of a sitting duck since I can't protect. Ogerpon can't protect either, having used the move last turn. If I can reposition, I will certainly have an edge, but I don't really see an easy way to get there. I decide to switch Flutter Mane out into Incineroar. Giovanni goes for Follow Me, negating my Ivy Cudgel, and Sludge Bomb drops my Ogerpon quite low. I saved my Flutter Mane, but at the cost of most of my Ogerpon. I feel pressured to make a call, and I decide to double the Landorus. The turn begins, and Landorus protects. Both my attacks do nothing, as Horn Leech knocks out my Ogerpon. What was looking like a favored position is quickly slipping through my grasp, as I fall behind for the first time in the set. I'm behind, so I need to make a call. I send out Chien-Pao. It's time to terastallize. I turn Incineroar to a flying type, becoming immune to Landorus's ground moves, and I protect Chien-Pao. Ogerpon goes for Follow Me as Chien-Pao blocks an Earth Power. Now, I'm the only one doing damage this turn, and Flare Blitz boosted by Sword of Ruin deals half of Ogerpon's health. That was a good turn, but in order to win this game, I need to make one more call correct. I can go for Icicle Crash to KO Ogerpon and Flare Blitz to KO Landorus, losing Chien-Pao in the process, but giving myself a 2-1 Pokemon lead, which will let me win if the last Pokemon is Urshifu or Incineroar. However, Giovanni knows this and can therefore protect Ogerpon and trade Landorus for Chien-Pao, putting us into a 2-against-2 scenario that he's very likely to win. So I'm going to call this out and go for a play that will lose me the game on the spot if Ogerpon doesn't Spiky Shield. I'm going to switch Chien-Pao out. The turn begins and Chien-Pao retreats to Flutter Mane. The next Pokemon to move is Ogerpon, going for Spiky Shield. Landorus KOs Flutter Mane as Incineroar hits Landorus with Flare Blitz.
Part of it too is that you're reducing the Sword of Ruin.
Oh,
but actually, I think he needed it.
He definitely needed that.
the Sword of Ruin to be able to pick up the KO.
With that, the game is over. Down 2 against 3, there is no way for me to win. Although I do get rid of Ogerpon, the damage has already been done. I lose game 1 after revealing the final Pokemon to be Urshifu, and once again find myself 1 game away from elimination from the tournament, this time staring down the defending world champion. But I did get some crucial information in that game. Landorus survives my Incineroar's Flare Blitz. That is really important to know as we head into game 2, and I think I see a way that I can use it to benefit me. Game 2 begins with the same leads, Ogerpon and Flutter Mane against Landorus and Flutter Mane. Turn 1 plays out in the exact same way. I Spiky Shield as Giovanni goes for Icy Wind and Sandsear Storm, and he hits both of his moves, as I pick up a knockout with Shadow Ball. Ogerpon is sent out once again. This time though, my plan is different. Instead of switching out with my Flutter Mane, I stay in. My Ogerpon is the first to move, using Horn Leech for a little chip damage. He launches a Sludge Bomb and a Horn Leech right back, knocking out my Ogerpon as my Flutter Mane goes for Shadow Ball and gets a critical hit that drops my odds of winning dramatically. See, in the back I have Farigiraf and Incineroar, not Chien-Pao this time. In order to win this game, I need to set Trick Room up. In order to set Trick Room up, I need to survive the turn. In order to survive the turn, I need Ogerpon to be out, not Giovanni's final Pokemon, Urshifu. I send out Incineroar, but the position looks untenable. The issue is that with Urshifu and Landorus on the field together at the same time, I can't use Farigiraf's Fairy Terra because Landorus will hit it with a Sludge Bomb for a knockout. With my Flutter Mane at -1 speed stat, I'm attacking after both of these Pokemon too. I can try and reposition because I have Fake Out active on this turn, but if Giovanni just attacks with both of his Pokemon, I will undoubtedly lose. So I terrestrialize to flying and try and go for Fake Out and Shadow Ball, but Giovanni just protects both of his Pokemon. Had I switched out this turn, I would be in slightly better shape, though it still would have been pretty rough. Now, things are looking really bad. Landorus knocks out Flutter Mane as Wicked Blow deals over half to Incineroar. Now it's my turn to try and get back into the game, with Incineroar using Parting Shot, lowering Landorus' special attack as I bring out Farigiraf and then Incineroar to replace my knocked out Flutter Mane. And I have set myself up to win this game. With Landorus at -1 special attack and Incineroar now a flying type, I can always get Trick Room up. I fake out the Urshifu, crucially breaking the Focus Sash and surviving a Sludge Bomb as Farigiraf twists the dimensions. Now, I just need to get one prediction right and I will win. Either Urshifu or Landorus could protect. If Landorus protects and I double into Urshifu, I will knock it out and activate Throat Spray, giving me a special attack boost on Farigiraf against a Landorus with a special attack drop. With 4 turns left in Trick Room, I will most likely win, though it will be close and depend on damage rolls. However, if Urshifu protects itself, I can use Flare Blitz into Landorus. We know that this will leave it alive based on last game. Landorus surviving will allow me to hit it with Hyper Voice, knocking it out and activating my Throat Spray, giving my Farigiraf a special attack boost. Now, with this boost, my Farigiraf will knock out their Urshifu in one hit on the following turn. This seems like a pure 50-50, but I realize something. Giovanni also has the option of attacking with both of his Pokemon on this turn, and if he does that, it is better for me to double attack the Urshifu. Therefore, if Giovanni protects Urshifu, it will cover 2 out of my 3 options rather than 1 out of my 2. And with that in mind, I can predict him to protect Urshifu, meaning my best move is to double attack Landorus. With my heart racing, I lock it in.
To pick up the knockout. So, is the Urshifu going to be able to take this game now for Giovanni? Because I don't think the Landorus is in any position to be able to do that now.
I don't think so, and it's not going to protect itself from this either. At this time around, it is a one-hit knockout, so the roll confirmed here, since it barely missed out on the KO in that game number 1, but got it this time around without a critical hit.
Turns out, it was a damage roll, a random chance that Flare Blitz would pick up the one-hit KO onto Landorus. Because Landorus lived with so much HP in game 1, I figured that it was pretty close to guaranteed to survive, but I was wrong. That must have just been close to a minimum roll. There was no way for me to know that this was a roll beforehand. I think I made the right play given the information that I had, but now things are almost guaranteed to be over. My Farigiraf did not get the special attack boost, which means that this Urshifu will survive a Hyper Voice. Unless, of course, Farigiraf gets a critical hit. With my entire tournament on the line, I lock in my move, knowing that I do still have a chance. Farigiraf uses Hyper Voice and it doesn't crit. Wicked Blow picks up a one-hit KO and I lose the set, and any hopes that I had of defending my title and winning the tournament. Of my losses this tournament, this one definitely stings the most. Getting bad luck in a difficult matchup against a great player is just a really frustrating way to go out. However, I know that I can't afford to mope, because even though I can't win the tournament, I do still have something to play for. I am pretty far behind on championship points, the currency used to qualify for the World Championships. And if I win all of my remaining rounds today, I'm guaranteed to take a sizable chunk home with me. So as I head to my seat for round 11, I still feel motivated. My opponent is a team that's half a good matchup and half a bad one. The bad one includes the Hisuian Arcanine, Assault Vest Raging Bolt, and Ogerpon Wellspring that gives me so much trouble on the Arabega team. But the other half of this team is Alola Ninetales, Articuno, and Goldengo, Pokemon who struggle immensely with my Sun mode. In game 1, my opponent leads with Ninetales and Raging Bolt against my Incineroar and Ogerpon. I switch Ogerpon to Torkoal and fake out the Raging Bolt as they fail Aurora Veil due to the sun. I predict them to go for Draco Meteor, so I switched Torkoal out into Flutter Mane as they switched Ninetales into Arcanine. But they predicted me and went for Electroweb, dropping my Flutter Mane speed. I Parting Shot, bringing Ogerpon back out. I switch Flutter Mane out into Incineroar as they terrestrialize Arcanine to Ghost, fearing Ivy Cudgel, and they go for Rock Slide and Electroweb. Terrestrializing may have saved their Arcanine from Ogerpon, but it now means that they no longer have a Fairy resistance. I see how I can win. They switch Raging Bolt out into Ogerpon as I fake out that slot, and Rock Slide flinches my Ogerpon as I try and Horn Leech, while also knocking out Incineroar. This flinch is unfortunate, but the knockout means that Flutter Mane gets to come in. My opponent switches Arcanine to Ninetales as I Follow Me and Dazzling Gleam, doing over half to both of my opponent's Pokemon. My Ogerpon feints to Horn Leech, putting me down 2 against 4 as I'm forced into Torkoal once again. Ogerpon spiky shields as Helping Hand Dazzling Gleam knocks out Ninetales. 2 against 3 as Raging Bolt comes back out. I terrestrialize to Fairy. Torkoal goes for Helping Hand as they launch a Thunderclap, but Flutter Mane survives despite the sun, and Dazzling Gleam knocks out both. Now I'm up 2 against 1, but Arcanine has Extreme Speed. It knocks out my Flutter Mane, but this time I didn't go for Helping Hand. Eruption KOs the Ghost-type Arcanine and I win game 1. I'm kind of shocked that they didn't lead with Arcanine last game, and so I decide to see if they'll get greedy in game 2. This time I lead with Incineroar and Flutter Mane against their Raging Bolt and Alolan Ninetales. This is a phenomenal lead for me. I can switch to Torkoal and launch Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam, which will threaten a KO on both of their Pokemon. The thing is that my opponent has one clear defensive play. They can terrestrialize Raging Bolt to Fairy and switch to Arcanine to not take too much damage on either of their Pokemon. If they do this, they can go for Electroweb, which will put them in a really good position turn 2 as they'll have speed control. So, given that I'm up a game, I decide to call out this specific play, because it kind of feels like the only thing that they can do. The turn begins and Ninetales switches to Arcanine, and Raging Bolt terrestrializes. But instead of switching out into Torkoal, I fake out Raging Bolt. And instead of locking into a Fairy move, I use Shadow Ball into the Ninetales slot, hitting the switched in Arcanine for 70% of its HP. My opponent's scariest Pokemon suddenly looks a lot more manageable. Arcanine switches to Ogerpon, who takes Shadow Ball for 60% of its health. Electroweb drops Flutter Mane speed, but I go for a parting shot and bring out my Farigiraf, an adjustment from last game from me. I switch Flutter Mane to Incineroar, who takes an Ivy Cudgel, as Raging Bolt goes for Snarl, and I twist the dimensions. I call that the Ogerpon is going to go for Spiky Shield, and I get it right. This lets me knock off Raging Bolt's Assault Vest and go for a Hyper Voice, getting my Farigiraf back to neutral special attack. Draco Meteor knocks out Incineroar, which is exactly what I was hoping for. I send out Torkoal and Terrafire Eruption knocks out all 4 of my opponent's Pokemon in the next 2 turns. I win round 11 with 2 rounds left in the tournament. Round 12 goes up, but I'm facing off against an Iron Crown team that aims to abuse Psychic Terrain to do massive damage, supported by powerful offensive threats like Ogerpon Hearthflame and Urshifu Dark, while also threatening a Tailwind mode. In the first game, my Terra Water Ogerpon Wellspring paired with my Incineroar lets me take an early lead, and I'm able to eventually convert into a win. Game 2 is spooky as we end up fighting inside Trick Room and I don't bring Torkoal, but in the end I find a way to win by locking my Flutter Mane into Mystical Fire, allowing it to beat both a damaged Urshifu and a healthy Iron Crown. I win round 12, leaving just one more round left in the tournament. Just one more round, and it's against a team that I haven't played yet. Using Tailwind Tornadus paired with powerful sweepers like Choice Specs Goldango, Regidrago, Ogerpon Hearthflame, and Urshifu Rapid Strike. This is a little bit spooky because I can't match their Tailwind, so I need to aim for Trick Room instead. Tornadus and Urshifu start the battle against my Incineroar and Ogerpon. I predict them to protect both of their Pokemon and switch Incineroar out into my Flutter Mane, giving me huge offensive pressure. Now, they can go for Tailwind and Surging Strikes to KO my Flutter Mane, but if I just go for Follow Me, they will lose on the spot. So I make an aggressive prediction. Urshifu switches out into their own Ogerpon as I go for a Dazzling Gleam. Bleakwind Storm misses my Flutter Mane as I go for Ivy Cudgel, knocking out Tornadus and denying them Tailwind for the rest of the game. Urshifu comes back out and I make another aggressive prediction. I switch Ogerpon out into Incineroar as they protect Urshifu, and I go for another Dazzling Gleam. They Ivy Cudgel, but it's into the Incineroar switch who shrugs it off. Now though, I get a bit too cute. I switch Incineroar back into Ogerpon as they terrestrialize their Urshifu to water. Dazzling Gleam drops both of their Pokemon low, but Surging Strikes KOs my Flutter Mane as Ivy Cudgel knocks out my Ogerpon. Suddenly, I'm down 2 against 3, but my last Pokemon is Farigiraf. I fake out Urshifu as they go for Ivy Cudgel, but it doesn't crit, and I get Trick Room up. I knock out Urshifu with Knockoff, sending them into their last Pokemon, Regidrago. This looks bad, except that I saved my Terra the entire game. I terrestrialize Farigiraf to Fairy, knock out Ogerpon with Knockoff, and hit Regidrago with a Hyper Voice as they go for a Dragon Energy that doesn't damage my Giraffe. Left with only Regidrago against a Fairy type boosted Farigiraf inside of Trick Room, my opponent forfeits and I win game 1. Importantly, I didn't bring Torkoal that game, and so I have an idea. Game 2 begins with my Incineroar and Farigiraf against their Tornadus and Urshifu. This Tornadus has Rain Dance, which is actually why I didn't bring Torkoal game 1, so my number 1 priority has to be to get rid of it. Urshifu terrestrializes to water, but I hit it with Fake Out as Tornadus goes for Bleakwind Storm and Farigiraf sets up Trick Room. Now I have a choice. If I double Urshifu, I will get the KO, but with Torkoal in the back, I double Tornadus. Hyper Voice and Flare Blitz knocks it out, as Urshifu retaliates with the Surging Strikes that knocks out my Farigiraf. I send out Torkoal as my opponent sends out their Ogerpon. I Terastallize Torkoal to fire, and even though they Aqua Jet, Eruption knocks out Urshifu and leaves Ogerpon in range of Incineroar. My opponent sends out their final Pokemon, Choice Specs Goldengo, and one more Eruption ends the game. I finished the tournament with a final record of 10 wins and 3 losses, and a final placement of 39th. If I'd placed a little higher inside of the top 32, I would have won prize money and more championship points, but 39th at an international still gives nearly 20% of the points that I estimate I need to qualify for Worlds this year. More than just the results, I consider this tournament to be a success. There's a lot that I'm proud of from this run. Not letting myself get discouraged after my losses, doing my best despite being severely sleep deprived on day 1, accepting that my team wasn't going to be perfect but was still the best option that I had, and playing well despite my opponent's teams not being anything like what I expected are all things that I've struggled to do well in the past, and doing them well here feels like a step towards becoming an even better player. Arguably more important than anything else, I had fun playing Pokemon. My last few events have been very stressful for a multitude of reasons, and was a big part of the reason why I took a 4-month break this fall and winter. I'd like to say thanks to the Pokemon Company International for taking event security seriously, as well as to the fans who I saw at EUIC who were especially considerate. I'm hopeful I'll be able to continue competing safely moving forward. Last thing from me, if you want to get the notebook I used this tournament for yourself, head to vgcnotebook.com. It is only available for a limited time right now. We're hoping to make it evergreen, but it really will depend on how well it performs. If you like this video and you want some more tournament action, I strongly recommend checking out last year's EUIC video. Honestly, even if you've already seen it, it goes pretty hard as a rewatch. Thanks again for all the support, and I will see you in Pokemon Champions.